You're right. You know, after having 2 sessions of drill, baby, drill, I want to offer perhaps a slightly different perspective on issues. Last June, temperatures in Europe were 3 degrees higher than in the last decade of the previous century. In Germany, since the beginning of the summer, 5,000 people have died because of this extra heat. France is faced with a challenge. 3 heat waves already this year, more coming. Fires everywhere, people dying, huge power plants being shut down because the water is simply too warm to cool. This is Europe. Europe is affected by the climate crisis more than any other part of the world. Our response to the climate crisis is of high importance. People challenging methane legislation should consider that methane has 80% higher effect on the CO2 emissions than CO2. 80% in the short run. Over 100 years is a bit less, but in the first 20 years, reducing methane emissions is critical, and the legislation, in my view, should not be touched. This should be implemented. And by the way, you know, if an oil company complains about that, an oil company that has made in the second quarter of this year $15 billion profit, I think they can be more forthcoming in trying to help us decarbonize the economy. Now, second point I quickly want to make. Europe will not be secure if Europe is not sovereign in the energy field. And for that, we need everything. Now, we need to reduce carbon emissions. We need to install, and we can install, huge amounts of renewable energy. Our biggest problem is that grids are not keeping up, and I think we need, and there Enrico Letta is absolutely right, we absolutely need a capital markets union so that we have enough capital to bring our grids up to standard, and then in combination with also hydrocarbons. I'm not rejecting hydrocarbons, but we need to reduce their role, and I'm sure we will be at maximum 30% in 2050. I'm sure about that, because renewables are simply much cheaper, and they come much quicker, especially in combination with renewable next generation nuclear energy generation. I believe in that combination. I'm not excluding hydrocarbons, but you should not overestimate their role. And we should keep in mind that Europe is suffering because of climate change, and we need to address that. We need to drastically reduce CO2 emissions, and we need to stick to our legislation. Final point, we also need to quickly reduce our supply lines, because the supply lines are vulnerable. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz can happen everywhere because of the newest drone technology. Sea drones are cheap, and they can disrupt any supply line. So proximity of supply lines becomes crucial. That's why this part of Europe, as far as hydrocarbons are concerned, and there I join the previous panels, is of such critical importance, because the supply lines are much shorter. But long supply lines, to be dependent on producers that might want to blackmail you, and I'm referring not just to the Russians, I'm also referring to some of the things said by the American president, that is not Europe's future.